Good morning, everybody. Nikki Burnett here, Taste Life Nutrition Radio, streaming live on KUHSdenver.com. Today we're going to talk about aging, which is one of those things that can be a great thing to be excited about, or it can be kind of hard, right? It can be a little bit difficult sometimes to think about how quick everything goes by. But two more. Good. Okay. Gotta turn up the radio. Anyway, so that leads me though to gratitude. We always start the show with gratitude. I was thinking about what I'm grateful for. So there's always so much to be grateful for, and I truly believe that gratitude can change the world. And so, I spend my mornings as I'm waking up in gratitude, and if I don't go to sleep too quickly, I try to spend my evenings before I go to sleep in gratitude. And so today for the show, I really wanted to talk about anti-aging, which is the buzzword, right? And so as I'm thinking about what I'm going to talk about and all that goes into this, I really am grateful for aging. It can be a difficult topic, and it's kind of one of those things that can be difficult to want to deal with, right? We're dealing with the wrinkles, we're dealing with the things that happen, and it can be hard sometimes. But if we're not aging, then we're not here. So I'm grateful to be here. I'm grateful to have a platform where I can chat about the things that I want to chat about. I can meet people who have amazing gifts to share and are here to serve and to love and to give. And so that's what I'm grateful for today. I'm grateful to be aging. So let's talk about aging. I think the first things first, though, is I want to, I talk about anti-aging and longevity, but I don't truly believe in anti-aging or longevity. And I say that because, for one, we don't know how long we're going to be here, right? We talk about, lengthening our lives, but what does that actually mean when we literally have no idea how long we're going to be here? We don't know what's going to happen in the next minute. We don't know what's going to happen in the next hour. We don't know what's going to happen in the next year. And so I think it's really important to keep that in perspective. And it really is about optimization, is what I believe is the case. Now, we can certainly do things to, lengthen our telomeres. We can do things to ensure, or to, at least the best of our ability, ensure that we are creating a better quality of life. Because really that's what it's about. It's not so much about the length of our life as much as about how well we're living during the time that we're here. Fully believe that. And so there are these buzzwords, right? The longevity and the anti-aging, and we can kind of go. We can go backwards. We can do things to help decrease, or to kind of make us anti-age in a sense. We're still aging every day, but we can do things in life with all the things that we talk about. Lifestyle, diet, movement, mitigating stress. All of these things are going to help us to increase telomeres. It's going to help us to live our life optimally, which is really the goal. It's my goal when I'm working with clients. And so I kind of wanted to dig into what all of this means and talk about it, get a little bit deeper in it, get into some of the mechanisms of aging, and then what we can do to optimize or to lengthen our telomeres, or to, create a situation where we're aging less quickly, right? Because we can see a lot. We can see people who look like they are aging quickly, and we can see people who look like they're not. So there are some biological processes of aging, which is normal and natural, but some of them can be sped up, right? The things that we're looking at are these mechanisms which there's this cellular senescence, right? And so what does that mean? So the definition essentially is it's cells enter a state of growth arrest after a certain number of divisions, preventing the replication of damaged cells, but also contributing to tissue aging and dysfunction. And so, we have cellular aging, but there's a process by which the body is supposed to clean this up and clear out the gunk and the junk. And this doesn't always happen, and we can do things to help to move that process forward. So there's also a situation that's going to speed up aging, but also speed up disease, speed up dysfunction, which is going to be DNA damage. Lots of things that are going to create damage to our DNA. I mean, if we have, if I look at I'm looking at a hormone test. I can look at this hormone test and you can see it go down specific pathways. So there are protective pathways, and this I'm speaking of estrogen particularly right now, but there are protective pathways, and then there are pathways that are going to cause DNA damage. And so we can, when we're running this particular panel, which is, the great thing about labs, right, is looking at these panels and understanding, is the body moving things down pathways normally, or is it becoming more pathogenic? And so if we have estrogen that moves down this particular pathway, it can cause DNA damage, and that's the stuff that we're looking for that has the potential of causing breast cancer, things like that, right? So we want to make sure that our pathways are functioning properly, that we're eating the foods that we need to eat, that we're detoxifying properly in order to move these hormones down pathways where they're not going to be destructive. And so I think it's important to remember that, but it's like that with a lot of things. And, sometimes we have pathways that function differently than others due to epigenetic variants, and that's okay. But again, it goes back to why it's so great to test and to understand these variants and your own epigenetic makeup, because we can look and we can see these variants, and we can understand if there are ways that we can help the body to function optimally, right? I have a friend who always says when it comes to epigenetics that there are no mistakes, and it's so true. Epigenetics is our potential, but it doesn't mean it's expressed. And so if we haven't gotten into that, I'm jumping ahead just a little bit, but sort of one of my favorite things in the world is epigenetics. And so what that means is, we have our genome, and on top of our genome, so what we thought at one time, not so long ago, was that our genetics was who we are. We had no choice in the matter. So if we have cardiovascular disease in our family, then we're going to have cardiovascular disease. If we have diabetes in the family, then we're going to have diabetes. Not the case. So once we started digging in and understanding the epigenome, which are locations on top of genes that are basically the little controllers of gene expression. So our epigenome is then controlled or dictated by lifestyle, right? So it's diet, it's stress, it's food, it's movement, it's too much movement or too little movement. It's, all of the things that are in our environment. It's toxicities in our air, toxicities in our water. Are we able to clean that stuff out? So, having an understanding that our epigenetic makeup is our potential, but it doesn't mean it expresses. It doesn't mean that that's who we are. So, Henry, I got this done if you want to come grab it. So... Just letting you know, we're multitasking over here. This is what we do. So, anyway, thank you. So I think that moving back to knowing how much control we have over our lifestyle really is so much, it really helps us to understand that we also then have control over, these helping pathways to function properly, which optimizes our health and allowing for our repair mechanisms to work properly. And so when we have things that can contribute to DNA damage, which, like I said, hormones going down an inflammatory, destructive pathway. We also have things, it's our environment, right? So many things in our environment can cause DNA damage. So it's the toxins, again, in our air, in our water, the pesticides and herbicides in our food. All of these things, although there are still those who believe it's not a big deal. Yes, our body is supposed to eliminate these things, but we are inundated with chemicals, intoxicants that is overwhelming to our body, and we can see this in the health of our population. We can see people with these multiple chemical sensitivities, and thank you, and who are struggling desperately. We talk about this downward spiral. You start to have symptoms, and then you have more, and you have more, and you may have more, and it's the body is just working so hard to address all of the toxicities. So sometimes we got to help it. Now, one of the things that I say a lot is the term dysfunction, and so I want to make it super clear that I'm becoming. It's an easy to understand term. But I don't know that I necessarily believe that the body is dysfunctional. I think the body is innately beautiful, and what it's doing when we feel what we think is dysfunction, we feel symptoms, that the body is actually doing what it's supposed to do. It's trying to protect us. The body is our little protector. It wants to live. That's its ultimate goal. And so I think it's an important way of looking at it, because when we are struggling with symptoms and struggling with dysfunction, instead of thinking that we're fighting our body, let's think about we're working with our body, right? We want to help it to do its job. We want to start to get rid of these root causes that can be so destructive and damaging, which often are microbes and toxicants and that kind of thing. So all of these things can impact repair mechanisms. It can accumulate, over, all of this DNA damage can accumulate, and so it then can lead to, certain mutations and genomic instability. So these are the things that we want to be really careful of as as we're moving through life. This is why we try to mitigate toxins in the air. It's why we try to run labs and understand what the body's trying to tell us, because the body's always trying to talk to us and give us information so we can help it, right? It needs our help. So oxidative stress is a term that many of us have heard. We've heard of antioxidants, we've heard of oxidative stress. This is a term that happens, that it's actually a very natural process, right? So we have these cellular processes that intentionally create oxidative stress and these reactive oxidation species. Reactive oxygen species. Goodness. And so this is a normal natural process, but we have to have the antioxidant capacity in order to squash it. So I was actually talking with one of my clients yesterday, and she was like, help me understand what this means, because we had done a neural panel on her, and so understanding brain function and inflammatory markers and all these things that's going on in the brain, which of course is connected to the gut. It's a really intense panel. There's a lot to it. And so we can look and see potentially why the brain is not functioning optimally, right? There can be so many things. And so we did this panel, and we also looked at her oxidative stress and her genetics that can influence her ability to mitigate oxidative stress, right? And so it's fascinating, the things that we can look at. It really is so fun. And so she's asked me, though, explain to me what this means. What does oxidative stress mean? And so in my mind, the best way to explain it is kind of like inflammation. And the way that I explain inflammation is we have, there's a fire. And if you know anything about fire, which most everybody knows, is oxygen's going to flame that fire, right? And so oxidative stress is the excessive amount of inflammation, the excessive amount of fire that is just constantly being fed, and we don't have the antioxidant capacity, or if it's a fire, we don't have enough of the water to put that out. And so that's what it takes, is it takes the antioxidants. Now, we can also overdo antioxidants. We have to have, again, it goes back to balance. We have to have this oxidative stress happening cellularly, but we also have to have the ability to put it out and to remove it. So it is the chronic oxidative stress that can then be damaging, damage DNA, damage cellular functioning, and then of course create a situation where we're aging maybe quicker than we should. It's really cool too. We can look at our sort of our cellular age, and it's fascinating because we can, once we know what that is and we start to do the work to reverse that, right, we can take it backwards. We actually have the ability to take telomeres and lengthen telomeres. And so what are telomeres? Telomeres are like these little hairs on our DNA. And they, over time, will just get shorter and shorter and shorter until they're so short that we no longer are here. But we can test this. We can look at our telomeres. I haven't done this yet. I really want to, but I haven't yet. But we can look at our telomeres and know the length of them, which gives us essentially an age that's beyond what our years are, and we can then do whatever we need to do in order to start to lengthen those telomeres. So really cool stuff. I think it's just so fascinating what we can do. And so and the other things that chronic oxidative stress can do is it can damage proteins, it can damage lipids, and so you think about damaging fats. Now this goes back to, and I have a lot here, so I'm probably not going to get to all of it. I'm going to do the best that I can, but when we're talking about damaging fats, damaging lipids, so inflammation is what is problematic for cholesterol. We have to have I've talked about this before. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but you can look at the other show that I did on cholesterol, where we really dug deep into cholesterol, what that means. But in a nutshell, we have to have cholesterol, we have to have LDL and HDL, we have to have both of them. So in a normal situation, we have these what we call big fluffy particles, right? And so they're going around and doing their job, and they call them fluffy buoyant particles. And so when we are not inflamed, it doesn't really matter how high our cholesterol is, because it's out there doing its job, right? We have to have LDL bring cholesterol to the tissue. We have to have HDL bring cholesterol away from the tissue. What happens is, in a situation where we're inflamed, and we can look at markers to understand inflammation, is that this inflammation then takes these particles that are supposed to be big and buoyant, and it oxidizes them, right? And it makes them small and dense, which means they're inflamed and super problematic. So this is why it's so important when we're looking at a lipid panel, is understanding inflammatory markers, but also understanding particle sizes of cholesterol, which is never seen on a typical comprehensive metabolic panel. Even if you ask for a lipid panel, I almost have never, the one that's come to me from a client that I didn't order, probably a handful of times have I seen a full lipid panel with particle sizes and inflammatory markers ordered. And that's what I do every time I order a lipid panel. It's always going to have inflammatory markers, and it's always going to have particle sizes. So I have a true understanding of what's going on, because looking at cholesterol as LDL bad, HDL good is a terrible way of looking at cholesterol. So we've got to know, is there inflammation? Is there oxidative stress, which is problematic for the lipids, which will increase our cardiovascular risk. Okay? All right. So moving on, we have certain genes that are also considered longevity genes. I'm not going to dig really into those, but it's interesting because we can look at these genetic markers and understand our potential for longevity and for health, right? And so we already talked about epigenetics, but epigenetics is environment. So this plays a key role in how our bodies and I mean, it is the key role in us creating our own optimization, right? And our own health for as long as we're here. This is the epitome of free will, right? I mean, as a God-fearing woman, you know, I love epigenetics so much just because it's like the proof of free will. You have the ability to make the choices about what you put in your body and what you put on your body and the toxins that you expose yourself to. For the most part, I understand we can't control, what the companies are putting in the air and that kind of thing, but so much of what we do on a daily basis, we have control over. It's just the most beautiful thing. I think it's this power of epigenetics, and then to take it, what I also love to talk about is then taking that epigenetic influence and how it impacts years ahead of us. Generations upon generations ahead of us. So it's showing 7 generations that it can impact. So if we are optimizing our health, we're anti-aging, we're only doing the health of the future good, because we are doing the same for our future if we are, of childbearing years and having families. So it's just so beautiful. I just love it. I think it's amazing. So let's see, other things that are important to consider. So, we talked a little bit about pollution, but radiation. We have so much radiation here in Colorado. There's a ton in California. There's tons in Texas. We can look. I think that EWG, Environmental Working Group, I know it can tell you what's in our water. If you put in your zip code, you can go to Environmental Working Group and water and put in your zip code, and it'll tell you the contamination in your water. And it's bad. It's really bad. But I think you can also look at what is more radioactive, the radioactive elements that might be in your soil that can come up through homes and that kind of thing. So, radiation has, a lot of it's normal and natural, but we can still have an abundance of it that can be harmful. So what can we do to pull that out and to mitigate the harmful effects of radiation, of the toxins in the water? We bind them out, right? We can do that, which is the coolest thing. We can take specific binders for those specific things and pull them out. One of the things I learned recently at one of the conferences that made so much sense to me was the binder is the new multivitamin. And I think that that's an amazing way of looking at it, because if we're pulling out toxins, then the nutrients that we eat and the water that we drink, it all has the ability to do its job, and the body has the ability to break it down and to utilize it if everything's working as it should, right? And binding out toxins are what use up nutrients. It's the body constantly trying to fight using these nutrients. And so if we're binding toxins and binding microbes that are not supposed to be there, then the body has the ability to do its job. So pretty fascinating stuff. But making sure, making sure you're avoiding the pesticides and the herbicides where you can, right? Don't eat food that's full of pesticides and herbicides. Don't put it in your yard. I know you can't control your neighbors, but you can talk to your neighbors, right? These are the things that are hard. I have a hard time, walking my dogs in my neighbors' yards, because when I see a yard that doesn't have any weeds in it, I'm quite certain that it's full of pesticides and herbicides. And all I want is for my dogs to be able to walk in yards and roll around in the grass. It's the best thing in the world, but we got to be really careful with that. So what do? I give my dogs binders, right? So I'm going to do everything that I can to optimize their health as well and mitigate the destructive potential of these toxins. All right, so talking about nutrition, it's one of my favorite things to talk about, being a nutritionist, but there are really great things that we can eat to help to squash that fire, right? To help to mitigate the reactive oxygen species, to help the cells function properly. And it's so simple, but our body's got to work properly as well, right? We've got to be able to break down the nutrients. We've got to have good fire in our gut. If we're taking these acid blockers, things like Tums and Pepsid, and these things that are squashing the fire in our belly, right? So we have hydrochloric acid on our belly. It's intentionally acidic. It's supposed to be acidic. If we're squashing that fire, we're not breaking down our nutrients. We're not utilizing our nutrients. We're allowing pathogens in, right? There's a reason. It's protective. Now, if you're struggling with something like heartburn, very often it's due to the fact that you don't have enough acid. So there are things that we can do to help to build your acid in order to, for your body to function properly. So think about that, and think about the amount of damage that it's causing if you're on constant PPIs and acid blockers. I should do a show on this. I really should do a whole show on this, but the acid blockers and the PPIs, again, it's reducing the acid, and it's protective, and it also is not allowing, so that if you don't have the acid, then you are not utilizing, absorbing the minerals and the vitamins in your food, right? So what does that mean? It's at least a factor leading to things like osteoporosis, osteopenia, many other issues. If we're deficient, which is what it's going to create, if we're deficient, that's when the body starts to struggle, right? That's what we call dysfunction, but it's dysfunctional because it's deficient in the nutrients it needs to do its job. So these drugs were indicated for like 2 weeks, and I see people who've been on them for 10 years, and you wonder why you got all of these symptoms coming up and you're struggling with these conditions. Is that a key player? Sure. I think it has to be. So really keep that in mind and figure out, if you're on it, you got to find a way to get off. Most people can't go cold turkey because it'll create a huge problem. And so I work with people a lot to help to get them off of these drugs. Now, if they're prescription, of course, we've got to work with their doctor. I don't take people off drugs because I'm not a doctor, but you can request to your doctor, help me get off of these things, and work with whomever you might be working with, your nutritionist or whoever it might be, to help you get off of these things, because they're really, really damaging. So kind of got off target a little bit there, but what I was going to get to was the foods that are going to help us to give the nutrients we need, as well as the antioxidant capacity to help to squash the pro-oxidants, the pro-oxidation that's going on, and the inflammation. So simple things like berries, right? So all fruit is going to have these beautiful phytonutrients, and all of these these components to it that have antioxidant capacity. And activity, but berries are great. Berries, one of my favorite things. They're low in sugar, so if you're diabetic, not a huge issue. You can eat berries, and they bring in lots and lots of antioxidants. And so we talk about the colors of the rainbow. It really is a big deal. So all of the colors have different properties, and they do different things in the body. And so the more color we can bring in, the more we're getting these phytonutrients, and the more beneficial it is for us to help the body to function properly, right? So, we talk about strawberries and raspberries and blueberries and that kind of thing. But, vitamin C is also an antioxidant, a really important antioxidant that we can get in food. We can also get it in supplement form, but if we can get it in food and utilize it, that's the best. Vitamin C has the shortest half-life of any other vitamin, or, as far as I know. There may be things that we haven't discovered yet, but to date, right now, vitamin C has the shortest half-life. So getting plenty of it regularly throughout your day is a good idea. So you can also get vitamin C through your vegetables. But vitamin C is really, really important. Other great antioxidants, right? We've got superoxide dismutase. We've got glutathione. Glutathione is considered the master antioxidant. So what it does is it helps in detoxification. It helps to recycle other antioxidants, and things like vitamin C and vitamin E help then to recycle glutathione. So we have to have plenty of glutathione for good antioxidant activity as well as detoxification. Okay, so then of course we have greens, right? Our leafy greens, they're amazing. So there's so many of them that we don't want to just eat one type. Greens also have some negative components potentially that we want to be careful of. And so when I say that, I'm talking specifically like spinach. Spinach is awesome, don't get me wrong. It is an amazing lettuce, but it's high in oxalates. And so what can happen, especially if we have epigenetic variants that don't allow us to eliminate oxalates properly, they can start to build up. So I have a client who is eating spinach 3 times a day, every day for a really long, I don't know if it was several months or a couple of years. I don't remember how long it was. But he ended up with kidney stones. Now, was that the only factor in this? Probably not, but my guess it was a really big factor. I don't know his genetics. We can look at that. We can see if somebody doesn't have the potential to eliminate oxalates as well as others. But we gotta remember that eating the same thing every day is never a good idea. We need variety. We need diversity. So eating things like romaine, an amazing lettuce, very light, very lightly flavored, virtually no oxalates, if any at all. But it's really important for us to have that as well, right? So there are lots of high oxalate foods. So if you know that this is an issue for you, it's probably worthwhile looking to see if you can look at your genetics, but making sure that you're really mixing things up so you're not just taking in a bunch of oxalates all the time. Okay, let's see. Of course, nuts and seeds are always great. So nuts and seeds are, especially raw, organic, that kind of thing. Nuts and seeds are a lot of them are high in vitamin E. Really great option for. Oh, whoopsie! Goodness gracious, lost my notes here. Anyway, so they're good healthy fats, but we want to make sure that they're not oxidated, right? Or the fats are not oxidized, because that can be inflammatory. So then of course we've got omega-3 fatty acids. So although they're not antioxidants necessarily, they are anti-inflammatory. And so they're anti-inflammatory and really important for us to get on a regular basis, because they're called essential fatty acids because they're essential, which means we have to get them in the diet. So your omega-3 fatty acids are coming from fish, from grass-fed cows. Something to remember is that you're not getting omega-3 if you're eating conventional cows or pigs or chickens, because there's not enough there to balance out the amount of inflammation that they have. So we have to remember, there is, just like everything else, there's a balance of omega-6 and omega-3. Omega-6 being pro-inflammatory, omega-3 being anti-inflammatory. We have to have both. But what we find in our diet, our typical diet, is we have way more omega-6 than we have omega-3. And so we have this ratio that we want to have, and this is the stuff that we can test. And I'm going to tell you, I don't know that maybe a couple of times, a handful of times, I've actually seen people come in with a good, normal, healthy ratio of omega-3 and omega-6. Usually it's too much omega-6 and not enough omega-3. So if we find that we're in this chronically inflamed state for whatever reason, we got to start to dig in and understand why. So, but getting good, healthy omega-3s is great. Oh, and really quick, I got to say this. I think it's so important because we hear all the time that we can get plant-based omega-3s and it's just as good. It's not. It is not. So plant-based omega-3 fatty acids have to be converted to the usable form EPA and DHA, which is natural in animal-based omega-3s, so in fish. So we have to, and this conversion from omega-3 in the plant-based form is really inefficient, and if we have certain variants, it doesn't allow it to happen at all. So we really need to have the omega-3 from fish or a fish oil supplement. Now there are certain algae. This is the only plant that actually is already converted, is the EPA and DHA. So if you prefer to do that, that's totally fine. It takes a lot more, but it can be done. So super important to remember that, you're not getting good omega-3s from your chia seeds, right? You're not getting good omega-3s from your hemp seeds. Doesn't mean not to eat them, doesn't mean they're bad. I'm just saying for that specific purpose, that you're not getting what you need, okay? Let's see, what else do we have here? So, moving on to, calorie restriction. This is a great one, because I feel like we've been really skewed on what it is that we're supposed to do as far as eating is concerned, right? Over the last however many, 100 years, say, right? So I think normally and naturally the body, it eats when it's hungry, doesn't eat when it's not hungry, eats when it's hungry. And so we have since, been given this information that, well, breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and we have to have breakfast, and it's the biggest meal of the day, and we got to get the metabolism, going, and all of these things, and then we got to have snacks because we got to keep the metabolism going. And I think it's been really detrimental to our health, to our hunger and satiety hormones, to our GI. I think it's been really problematic. So first off, everybody's different, right? Some people really just do need to eat breakfast. But if you don't eat breakfast, don't eat breakfast. If you're not hungry, don't eat breakfast. Now we also have to understand, there are times when you're not hungry and like you're never hungry, that's also a problem. We got to listen to the body. The body's going to tell us if you're just not hungry, we got something to address. But I'm a person, I've been this my entire life, that I remember when I was a kid even, I don't want to eat breakfast. It doesn't feel good to me, at least eating early. It doesn't feel good to me. I don't like it. It's not my thing. So I might eat anywhere from 10 a.m. to noon. And when I'm starting to get hungry, that's when I eat. So it really is a matter of listening to your body, but also understanding we don't want anything to be causing damage also. So I think it's also problematic to snack. Now, if you are an elite athlete and you are just burning calories, then you might be one of those people who needs to snack and keep the food going. Not that I necessarily think that that's healthy either, but there are people who need to eat more, and there are certain situations where we need to eat more, right? So again, it goes back to the individual, but very generally speaking, what we typically want to see is an empty gut, right? So we eat, we let it empty. So having the rumbling and the grumbling going on, what that's doing is it's moving things through the GI tract. It's moving out microbes that are not supposed to be there. It's moving out fungi that are not supposed to be there, right? So it's working to eliminate all of the things after it's eliminated food. So we want to have a feeling of emptiness, because it helps the body to work. And then when we decide we want to eat, then we eat, right? So, but just snacking and eating and grazing and all of these things, I think it are really screwing with our hunger hormones and our satiety hormones. And we get to where we don't understand if we're hungry or not. And that's a problem. Now, I also am very aware that there are struggles with the habit of eating, or some mental and emotional factors that can go into this as well, right? So lots of things need to be addressed. Again, I'm speaking very generally in what we want to look for. I will say that I had a client who was an emergency department doc, and she would not be hungry until she was almost like throwing up. And so there was no in between for her. And we had to actually make her eat. We had to get you just a little bit of food early in the morning so we can get that going. So, and it did, it helped her a ton. She started to understand her cues and her signals and her body. And that's one of those things that we have to be super aware of. So moving into caloric restriction, then, I'm not talking about we have to eat 500 calories a day every day for our entire lives. That's not what I mean either. You want to work through this, through understanding what your body needs if you're going to do any kind of caloric restriction, and do it safely and carefully and with guidance if you don't already have it. So, but if we do some caloric restriction, that's what can help the body go through what's called apoptosis or apoptosis, which is it's a calculated essentially cell death. And so the cells that are supposed to die off. It also can clean out gunk, right? So we can do fasting. Fasting is biblical. Fasting has been around for thousands and thousands of years, but I think it's important to do it safely. We also, I'm not sure that it's the thing to do if you're a super high stress person, or if you're in a have specific disease states going on. We got to be really careful with what we're doing and how we're treating our body. But for a normal, healthy person, I think fasting has a place. It can be a good idea. And so I said apoptosis. That it's correct, but I also meant autophagy. So autophagy is where we're cleansing and clearing out cellular debris, essentially, right? So apoptosis is cell death, and autophagy is clearing out gunk, essentially. So then we get into intermittent fasting, which I think can be it works really, really well for most men, which is really fun. I think we have to, as women, we've got to be careful with it, but I think it also can be a great way of watching our food intake and being aware of it. The thing that I want to be careful of, though, and I've heard this on multiple occasions with clients who tried intermittent fasting, is you fast, and then you get to a point where you're so hungry that you're just stuffing your face, right? This is not okay either. So we don't want to do that. We want to eat, to be able to eat normally, but but if you're fasting, you have your timed fasting. If it's too long, then shorten it, right? You want to build up to it. So sometimes it's 12 hours fasting and 12 hours eating. Sometimes it's 10 hours fasting and 8 hours eating. I'm not saying that right. 6, and then you go to 6, I'm sorry, 10 and 12, 14. Jeez, 10 and 14. So up to, some people might do, 16 hours fasting and 8 hours eating, or even more. Again, goes back to, it depends on the person. But it doesn't mean that you're, just sitting there stuffing your face during that 8 hours or 5 hours or whatever you decide you want it to be. It also can be, you mix it up. And I think that this is important for women, is mixing it up and not always doing, the same thing, because I think that sometimes it can be tough on the thyroid. And so maybe you do 5 days of fasting and 2 days of normal eating, something like that. I do know you could eat breakfast and then fast until dinner. You could do it that way. So lots of ways of doing it. Again, I think a big part of that is creating that emptiness and letting the body to work properly. And not making, more than anything, just not taking in excessive calories. I am not a big calorie counter. I don't think that it really is beneficial for us. Now, it can help us to understand a lot of things. I've counted my own calories. But to focus just on that, I think it can be really problematic. But it is also important to understand that a calorie is not a calorie, right? You eating a handful of, or say you're eating, a piece of cake, that's the same calorie count as a handful of blueberries, or however many blueberries it takes to equal the same calories. Your body's going to do two different things with those calories, with the nutrients that are in there. Whereas cake is going to be nutrient depleted, and blueberries are going to be nutrient dense, right? So we have to make sure that we're eating nutrient dense foods and not nutrient depleted foods, and that's more important than counting calories, right? So let's see. Of course, we know about physical activity. Interestingly, though, physical activity will create these reactive oxygen species, right? It creates stress. It creates this pro-oxidative place that our body might be in. But it's another reason. I mean, we have to have exercise. We have to have movement, and so eating your antioxidants just help to squash that fire. But just creating energy within the mitochondria is a pro-oxidant. But continuing to eat good, healthy food is what helps us to squash that fire. So we've got to move. We always have to move. And so I'm not going to go deep into this, but I think, more than anything, understanding that strength training, especially as we're aging, is so important to keeping us strong. It is anti-aging, because if we can, it's doing these functional movements. I do CrossFit, and it's, when we're doing squats, it's not about doing the squat, although we're doing, squats with heavy weights. It's about being able to sit on a toilet when you're 90. Right? I mean, that was one of the best ways that was explained to me, however many years ago now, is you got to be able to move. You got to be able to do the things, whether it's just carry your groceries, right? You got to be able to do these things until you're done, right? And it's so important to live a life where you are fully functional, and you got to have good muscle to do that. So what happens a lot of times is we deal with what's called sarcopenia. We start to lose our muscle mass. So why is that? Well, it's the fire in our gut not where it should be, which means we're not getting the amino acids that we need, which means we're not building muscle tissue and bone tissue and all of these things and neurotransmitters that we need amino acids for. So always ensuring that our GI is in a good spot, that we are always taking care of our GI, so we're breaking down nutrients and utilizing the nutrients, including the amino acids that are in protein, so we can build muscle. But we also have to move. We've got to do strength training. I don't care how old you are, we've got to do strength training. I had a client not too long ago, she was telling me, she's like, well, I just moved up in my weight for my exercise. I was like, that's amazing, that's so good. She said, I don't know if I'll go any heavier though, because I don't want to bulk up. And I was like, you're not going to bulk up, right? So look, I lift heavy weight. There's no bulk here. I have a lot going on there. So you're not going to bulk up. Women not really intended to bulk up. So don't be afraid of lifting heavy weight, not to the point of getting hurt, but lifting heavy weight, because that's the stuff that's going to put on muscle tissue and help you to age well, and have good muscle tone, right? We've got to have good muscle tone in order to age well and to optimize. Flexibility, of course, is important, so we can get all tight. We've got this fascia that can get super tight, and can be really problematic if we're not stretching. So go do the gym or do whatever you do to work out, but make sure that you're stretching also. And walk. I mean, yes, we need some cardiovascular movement. We need to get out, we need to walk. but I don't believe that that's enough. I think that we have to do weights in order to fully optimize. Okay, so let's see. We talked about cardiovascular health. I think that's probably good enough. I think that we all pretty well know how important sleep is. Sleep is key to anti-aging. We have to sleep. We have to, in order for our hormones to function properly, in order to keep our stress levels at bay, in order to do life, we have to have sleep. And so if you're not sleeping well, you got to find out why. And so there are, is sleep root cause to dysfunction? Potentially, but there's that deeper question of why. Always ask why, right? So we want to understand why you're not sleeping well. There can be a lot of things that are going on that decrease your ability to sleep. So yes, it can be hormonal, but why are your hormones off? Sure, it can be toxicants in the air, right? That can be a root cause of why you're not sleeping well, because your body's not able to handle the toxins. So we need to understand that, and we got to get sleep. We got to get sleep for growth hormones, right? If we're producing good growth hormones, which is what happens when we sleep, that is anti-aging. That helps us to optimize. So we've got to have good quality growth hormone. And then, let's see, let's go into, I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but if we're not sleeping well, there are a number of health risks, including, obesity and diabetes and cardiovascular disease and Alzheimer's and all of these things, but it's going to increase the incidence of cognitive decline. We see this a lot as we age. We see our cognition start to tank, right? For a lot of people, not for everyone, but we can mitigate this. We can mitigate this by nutrition, by supplementation. This is something that I'm working on personally, is my brain health and my cognitive health, because I want to start now. I know what my genetics are, and I want to ensure that I'm doing everything that I can to keep my brain healthy, keep any kind of neural inflammation down, and make sure my neurotransmitters are all in line, and that my thought processes continue to be strong. I have a lot of things that I want to do, a lot of things that I need to do, a lot of things that I want to learn, a lot of things that I believe that I'm put here to do. Without a strong brain, those things can't be done, right? So I need to ensure that continues to be as strong as I can possibly make it. So that's sort of been my focus over the last couple of years. If you've been watching this for a while, you know that, because I talk about it a lot. So stress management, I think that's a given. I think a lot of us don't realize how stressed we are. That will certainly push aging, without a doubt. You have high cortisol levels, which are gonna, can impact sleep, but it increased that high cortisol, chronically elevated cortisol, is going to be inflammatory, is going to interfere with sleep, and is going to push the aging process. So doing your prayer time, right? Doing your meditation, being still, being aware of what's going on. I think that we don't understand the amount of stress we're under very often. And I ask people if they're stressed, they're like, no. But if they're struggling with disease, if you're struggling with symptoms, if you're struggling in a relationship, if you're struggling financially, if you're struggling in business, all of these things are going to create stress. So consider the fact that if you have a symptom, that's stress on the body. If you have brain fog, joint pain, GI dysfunction, that's stress, right? On top of the rest of the life and environmental stressors that they are. So consider that you have stress, and you need to find that time to be still, and don't eat on the run. If we eat while we're still, our body has the ability to break down the nutrients and utilize the food. So being still is so much bigger, I think, than we realize it is. If it might be the number one thing, because stress is the key. I just said all of these things that can create stress. Stress is a key issue, it's that vicious cycle, right? Stress creates inflammation, which creates more stress, which creates disease, which creates more stress, which creates problems in life, and we can go on and on and on. So mitigating stress is the number one thing for us to do, to roll back the years on our cells and our telomeres and our DNA, right? We have to mitigate stress. Let's see. We talked a little bit about hormones. We're kind of starting to run short on time, but we can, as women age, we start to lose, as we know, we start to go through perimenopause. Our hormones are changing. We go through menopause. We start to lose hormones. So what can we do? There's some, not everybody's on board with this, but, bringing back in hormone replacement therapy, as long as it's bioidentical, for some people can be a good thing, right? And men go through andropause, right? Now, a lot of that's due to lifestyle. I fully believe that. But they can go through andropause, and, you start to lose your testosterone. Women are starting to lose their testosterone. What can we do to mitigate that so the body is doing what it's supposed to do and it's reacting normally, and men are not losing their testosterone, right? What can we do? Should we have to do hormone replacement therapy? I wouldn't think so, but it can also be kind of that anti-aging. It is part of the anti-aging movement. We want to feel well, we want to look well, we want to do all the things, but do we look at it as a Band-Aid? Maybe. And we don't want Band-Aids, right? We want to be as optimal as we can through diet and lifestyle and that kind of thing. But for some people, I think it's a really great option. But you've got to be careful with it too, right? You've got to be really careful with who you go to, who's doing the hormone replacement therapy, because if it's not bioidentical, it's a problem. But also, if it's not being done properly, if all of the hormones are not being checked, especially, it's a big thing with men who have blood sugar imbalances and have a belly. Their testosterone is actually converting to estrogen. And so you start putting in, testosterone pellets into men, and you're not addressing their lifestyle, they're just going to continue converting, it's called aromatizing, but converting that testosterone to estrogen. This is a huge problem. We've got to really understand all of the hormones, or at least the hormones that are all related, the sex hormones in this area. Of course, cortisol is going to play a role in there, and insulin and that kind of thing, but we have to understand all of these things in order to optimize hormones and to allow the body to function properly. Okay, let's see, what else do we want to talk about? I think that we're probably running short on time. I think, we talk about gut all the time. Optimizing gut health is a key player in neurotransmitters, in cognitive health, in our immune function. So we have to have good, healthy gut to utilize any of the nutrients that we're taking in. So we've talked a ton about gut. So if you want to go back to one of the other shows where we really focus on that, that's great, because we have a lot of information in there. But having a good, healthy gut is going to be anti-aging, right? It's going to be optimal. So we're getting everything that we can from our food. So a lot of really cool anti-aging treatments out there that are pretty innovative. There's NAD therapy. You can get NAD through in supplement form through IV. I think that can be great. Stem cell therapy, I think, is really cool. There's something called EBU that is like a blood filter, so it filters out toxins and microbes and oxygenates the blood. So it's really, really cool, and it's a therapy that can help with symptoms. But if we're helping symptoms, if we are getting rid of health risks and health conditions, it's anti-aging, right? It's optimizing. We're turning back the time because the body's not struggling any longer. So lots of these cool things. Peptide therapy is a great one. Exosome therapy. All of these are really beneficial in what we call anti-aging, but optimizing, right? That's really what it's all about. It's optimizing. So there's some really cool tests that we can look at, I think a lot of these we've talked about. So the telomeres, telomere length, inflammatory markers like homocysteine, C-reactive protein, interleukin 6, there's tumor necrosis factor alpha. So those are really important inflammatory markers to keep track of and to know. Look at your metabolic markers, your glucose, your insulin, your lipids. We talked a lot about those. And then, of course, what I'm all about, what so many of us in, the functional health space are about is really about personalization. We run these labs to understand who you are, so we can optimize your health. You're not everybody else. I'm not everybody else. There's nobody else like me. Thank God, right? there's nobody else like you either. And so we want to optimize your health based on who you are, your needs, your goals, your environment, your situation, your genetics, your lab markers, so we can optimize, which is anti-aging. All right, so I'm going to stop there. We're running a little bit long, but thanks all of you for joining me. It was so good to see all of you here. I got a ton of y'all. I got Daryl, good to see you. Hi, Missy. And Michael, wow, it's been a while. So good to see y'all. Thanks for being here. We're here every Thursday, 10 a.m. Mountain Time, streaming live on KUHS, the stream on KUHSdenver.com. You can find us. There's an app, KUHS app. I've got it, in multiple places on the social medias, so you can just click on the QR code or go to the link, and you can always just find us there. It goes straight to us streaming live. And then, of course, we'll find us wherever you find your favorite podcast. Probably next week we'll get that up, so you can always find us there. So anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful week and a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next Thursday, 10 a.m. sharp. See you later.